Can you identify 3 potential issues from this context? Now have a look at the context, the screen and the words. So here we have photograph of a football player, Angus Brayshaw from Melbourne. Context: in March 2024, an AFL player was medically retired due to a history of concussions. Political issues arising from this context. Now remember, see if you could identify 3 of them. The context, of course, is the medical retirement of an AFL player. One potential issue arising from this context is the AFL to further revise concussion protocols for players, and it is a sports and medical issue. A second possible issue, AFL to increase penalties for actions by players deemed to be careless unless they have taken reasonable steps to avoid contact. Once again, a sports and medical issue. A third potential issue is the AFL to introduce compulsory helmet wearing for midfielders. Once again, a sports and medical issue. A fourth potential issue could be the salary payment for players who are medically retired from the AFL before their contract completion. This expands this issue a little bit more because not only is it a sporting issue, it becomes financial and political as well. And a fifth possible issue is that payments to players who are medically retired from AFL before contract completion, that they not be included in the club's salary cap. Once again, sporting, financial and political issue. How many did you name? This section, Section 2, Knowledge and Skills for Analysing Persuasive Texts. This lesson is about big picture questions needed for analysis. What's in this lesson? Lesson breakdown. Why are the 5 big picture questions so important? What are the 5 big picture questions for analysis? Issues and their levels and types, and context, background and information. The most relevant study design dot point for this lesson is to summarise the key points in persuasive texts. Why are the 5 big picture questions so important? There are 3 reasons why finding answers to the 5 big picture questions are so important when you're analysing persuasive texts. 1, it stops you identifying and labelling persuasive techniques. 2, it gives you a deeper understanding of the persuasive texts. And 3, it helps you frame your analytical response. It's really important to keep in mind that high-scoring performance descriptors of the written SAG state examines critically how the author guides an audience by use of strategic sequencing of argument and examines pivotal aspects of the text and the role of inference and its relation to persuasive intent. This inference is very important, and we can see here it's defined as an inference is a conclusion reached based on evidence and reasoning. It involves reading between the lines of a text and finding aspects not always specifically stated that help persuade intended audience. What are the 5 big picture questions? Well, before we even get to those, what you need to remember to do is read the background information if it's provided. And you should always read and view and listen to the persuasive texts and find answers to these 5 questions before you write. Okay, 5 questions. Number 1, what is the issue and its context? Number 2, what is the form or forms and who is the intended audience? Number 3, how does author's purpose, personal identity and context affect audience? 4, how is argument constructed to position audience? And 5, how does language, visuals, features of different forms combine with argument to persuade audience. Now, other lessons in this section are on author identity and context and purpose, and intended audience and appeals, if you need more information. Let's look at issues. Issues arise from events, incidences, changes, or experiences. They are subjects or problems of public interest, and they have multiple viewpoints. For example, as a result of a tragic incident of a surfer dying from a shark attack, there may be the issue of whether or not shark culling should be introduced. Different viewpoints on shark culling issues involve shark nets are more effective than shark culling. Tagging sharks is more effective than shark culling. Better signage and surveillance of surf beaches is needed instead of shark culling. You can have several issues, and you can have several points of view related to an issue. There are also different levels and types of issues. So levels can be global, national, statewide, can affect only the local community or a specialist group of people. There can also be different types of issues. They can be political, legal, environmental, animal rights issues, medical, religious, economic, educational, sports, gender issues, social, moral, justice, all different sorts of issues, many more than just what's stated here. So how do different contexts lead to issues and media texts production? So remember, your contents is your background information, what's happened, an event, an incident, change, or an experience specifically. There may be others. So we might have like a protest march as an event. You might have, as we did before, shark attack as an incident. A change might be a change in legislation or a person's thinking or in the introduction of a ban. And an experience might be just a personal one, personal visit to a parkland, country town, public transport, or being a victim of a scam. All these things, all this background and context leads to potential issues. And then these issues, as we have seen, that leads to different points of view, which then lead to people writing arguments, and they're presented in media texts. Context and background information, super important. The context or background information of an issue being discussed refers to the environment in which the text is created. It offers information about who, how, when and why a text is created, and it can include environment, social, historical, cultural conditions, events, incidents, changes or experiences that created issues, and whether the text is in response to another text, which is always an important thing to determine. Background information is context information along with other information, and it can be found in background information box in the end of the year exam, and it may be included in your written SAC. Let's have a look now at a sample piece of background information. This sample comes from the VCA end of year exam 2017, and they're usually just in a box. I'll draw a box before the persuasive texts are written. So they come after the instructions but before the persuasive texts. Vital. The principal of Spire Primary School writes a weekly message for the school's website. She invites comments, favourable or unfavourable, to be posted after her message appears. The principal has been concerned about the amount of packaging waste she has seen around the school. Her message about this concern and a response from one parent are on the following pages. So what can we find out from here? Okay, we know one of the authors is a principal. And principal of the school, that's her status. So does she have more authority, more expertise in this matter? She invites comments, favourable or unfavourable, to be posted after her message. The principal has been concerned about the amount of packaging. Here is the issue. Packaging waste around the school. Now we also have a response from a parent, so that is author 2. We say this one is author 1. What is the context? The context is the amount of packaging waste that has appeared. The issue is the packaging waste. Is there too much of it? What is her form? It is a weekly message. So it could be a newsletter, digital or print, whatever. Okay, and then we have the other form, which could be a response. So from this sample of background information, we have some really valuable stuff. Authors, forms, and we have the issue and the context. Now it's your turn. You need to identify the issue, context, author, and forms in the background information presented on the screen. Use the key on the right to highlight or underline these different elements. And the background information is from the 2020 end-of-year exam. Now let's look at my analysis of that same piece of background information from the 2022 exam. HAPSI's Happenings is a podcast. There we go straight away. Form and audience. So we know that one. Hosted by lifelong HAPSI resident. That's the context. Janelle Tanley, this is the author and personal identity. These could probably be together. Like the fact that she is a lifelong HAPSI resident is also part of her personal identity. So we could have had blue spread all along there as well. She discusses local events and issues and promotes the conservation of the town's local environment. Once again, we probably could have yellowed that. That could have easily been part of her context. In her most recent episode of the podcast, Tanley discusses a proposed development for the HAPSI wetlands by Nature and Adventure Group. This is clearly the issue. They run commercial excursions into unspoilt areas. The following text is a transcript of this episode. So once again, with images, this could probably be a bit pink too, because it's a transcript provided by Tanley. Okay, so in a nutshell, what was in this lesson? The 5 big picture questions. What is the issue and its context? What is the form or forms? And who is the intended audience? How does author's purpose, personal identity, and context affect the audience? How is argument constructed to position audience? How do language, visuals, and features of the different forms combine with argument to persuade audience? Now, they are really important, these 5 big picture questions, for you to find the answers so that the actual response you write uses inference and attains complexity. What's coming next? Forms and features of media texts.